Windows Recall is coming back. Did they do a better job this time? Well, there's some improvements. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other alternatives. And we're going to go ahead and chat about some other thoughts that I might have in this whole mess. Thanks for checking out this video by Switch to Linux, where we talk about Linux and why we should change to Linux, and part of that is looking at the shenanigans going on inside of Windows. That is what caused me to switch. I still get a few comments saying, well, this is a Linux channel, why are you talking about Windows all the time? I switched to Linux because of Windows shenanigans. It only makes sense to keep up with the Windows shenanigans, so if these types of things bother you, or you may not even know some of these things are happening, we can tell you about it, and then you can make an informed decision. Is a change in operating system viable for you or not? That is the purpose of this channel. And here on Wednesdays, we talk Windows. So welcome to your weekly edition of Wednesday Windows on Switch to Linux. All right, I'm making tongue twisters for myself. Subscribe to this channel if you like to see this type of content. Leave us a comment down below and about your thoughts on these articles today. Of course, we are going to be talking about Windows Recall. So to summarize Windows Recall, if you missed the first round of videos, or maybe you've heard a little bit of buzz about it and you're like, I don't know, I haven't really heard about it exactly. I don't know exactly what's going on. Windows Recall is a new feature they are adding to the Copilot Plus PCs, which the fundamental principle of these machines is they have an NPU, I think it's called a neural processing unit. Basically, it's an embedded AI chip. So only certain computers will run these. Now, this is not related to Copilot itself. Once again, Windows has a massive branding problem, guys. Remember, they have Outlook, the application, and Outlook, the service. They released the Windows, was it called the RT? And then when Windows 8 came out, they had an RT version based on ARM that couldn't run your standard Windows programs. I mean, they have had a massive branding issue all the time. They're doing the same thing. Copilot is an AI assistant on all Windows systems. A Copilot Plus PC is a Windows computer that has an AI chip, and the plan for these AI chip computers is to have a service called Recall, which Recall is an AI tool which will take a picture of your computer roughly every 3 to 5 seconds. It will use AI and OCR and other tools to analyze what is going on in that picture and create a database on your computer that is searchable. The idea is that you can go back within 3 months' time and say, I was talking about cats. Tell me all the places in the last 3 months where I talked about cats. And it's going to give you a list of places with photos of your desktop where anywhere you were talking about cats. And so that is really what AI did. It was doing screenshots using AI to analyze the images, AI and OCR. It was dumping the data into an SQLite database, which is a single file on your computer. It was searchable, and allegedly all of the data is stored and analyzed locally. That was a key principle because, Microsoft does have a habit of pushing data out to the cloud, even though they say that they are not going to do that. Now, the problem that we had with Recall when it first came out is, first and foremost, we had this issue where Recall had to run on certain computers. However, prior to it coming out, people were able to get it working on computers that did not actually meet the requirements, and this led security researchers to look at it before it dropped to the first computers. Literally, this was Windows' plan. We're going to have this amazing thing. We're going to drop it live onto your systems that nobody can see until these computers are actually available. That was literally their plan. Well, security researchers got it working on computers without the NPU chips, which basically meant it chugged the computer along a little bit more data heavy, but it still worked and it was functional. And then the security researchers look at this and go, oh my God. So this was an article from June when they decided to pull the plug. There were several problems with Recall. The biggest problem with Recall is they used the wrong type of encryption. You see, there's three basic types of encryption that we're talking about with data. One of these is called at rest. One of these is called in motion, and one of these is called in use. I'll do a whole deep dive video on these with a little bit more examples. But effectively, the data at rest is when your hard drive is encrypted, or maybe even your user folder is encrypted. With data at rest, if somebody steals your laptop, they can't get into your data without those decryption keys. It's very good for a portable computer or something with a high theft risk. So that is certainly something to keep in mind. Now, in use means that it must be decrypted prior to use. So you already have your disk. Like if you have full disk encryption and you are using your computer right now, all of the data on that computer is available to anybody using that computer while your computer is unlocked and available, unless you use in-use encryption. Now, in-motion deals with transmitting data across networks. We're not going to discuss that today. In-use is kind of like my KeePassXC file. It is a deeply encrypted file which contains all my passwords that even if my computer is on and working, you still need to authenticate to get into that file. You still need to use either the passkeys or the password or whatever method I'm using to secure that file. It is in use, which means to use it, you have to authenticate. Well, the first version of Recall, they did not encrypt any of this data. So anybody with access to the computer, if the computer was turned on, could literally access everything. And so it was not secure. Of course, it was also enabled by default, causing a whole lot of people to go, "Ah, that's crazy." That's what they were doing. So the major changes that they are doing in response to all of these security researchers pointing this nonsense out, first thing they did is they said, well, we're going to poll it for some unknown time. Well, that unknown time is coming back. They're bringing it back. And from articles last week, Microsoft is going to try the data scraping Windows recall feature again in October. So it's going to land itself into the previews. So now they've delayed it. Now there's Copilot Plus PCs floating around in the universe without recall on it. They are putting recall now into the testing branch of Windows so that people can now look at it on real hardware instead of hacking it into something, in case the hacking it into something caused some of these problems, which Microsoft is pretty clear now. It was just, we were stupid. And so what we have here is that the major changes they're doing, first and foremost, they are installing it by default on every PC that's capable of running it, but they're not enabling it by default. So you have to go in and opt into using it, even though the software is going to be installed on your computer if you have a Copilot Plus PC that is capable of running this software. The second thing they are doing is they are enabling in-use encryption, which they should have done the first time, which means that you have to have your computer set up with Windows Hello. Now, in-use encryption could be a password, it could be a passkey, could be a number of other different things. What Windows does by default is uses Windows Hello, which is their way of using mostly biometrics or a PIN in order to unlock things. So if you have some feature or function in your computer that you need to authenticate yourself with a PIN or biometrics in order to use it, that particular component of your Windows computer is using in-use encryption. This means that in order for anybody to access or view the data, not only does the computer have to be on and into your user account, but now you actually have to go in and you have to authenticate yourself every time you use it. And if you're using it for a long period of time, you might have to go in and re-authenticate yourself. Maybe if you step away from the computer for 5 minutes and come back, you might have to re-authenticate yourself then. These are both good features that it is not enabled by default and it is using in-use encryption by default. This solves most of the security holes. And then they do mention here that security continues to be a top priority, which of course is why they're tying security breaches to their CEO salaries now, their executive suite salaries, because they've actually have such a really poor track record for security, by the way. Security continues to be our top priority. When recall is available for Windows, we will publish more details then. They also reiterate that everything is done locally on the computer. That is their allegation anyway. And with that, they're saying that this is a much better implementation than what they had the first time. And so that's really what they're saying. Okay, we can accept it. Let's go ahead and buy that as a basic premise. I have a few basic concerns still about this. The first thing is Windows often tries to enable data syncing with OneDrive particularly. How do we know that they're not collecting this data? In fact, I went back and was it last year in April 2023, this person asks on the Windows forums, did OneDrive just get auto-enabled on accounts after the latest April update? So this person here probably turned it on accidentally. However, I'm going to point something out here that she says, just before my son went back to uni, he checked his laptop and every file and folder of his documents had a red X against it. He had never signed into OneDrive. There's 25 gigabytes of files in the documents folder, the red X indicating he had no space left, free 5 gigabyte account. Only thing I can think of is the latest update done in the last week had enabled OneDrive and started moving files onto it without checking for space or asking first. He has 25 gigabytes. There is no way he's using OneDrive before now. We took a backup of his documents folder in the last week to a local NAS drive. Obviously, he is still several hundred miles away. He has no access. I don't put the NAS drive on the internet. We didn't have time to check a couple more files before he had to leave or that they were okay, nor do we have time to restore the backup, as that would have taken a few hours. So they ask some of these questions. Here is literally the response from the independent advisor. I just find this response just hilarious. I am this guy. I promise I'm not a hacker. Windows does pop-up suggestions for OneDrive from time to time, so it could be an accidental acceptance which caused OneDrive to activate. So this is the big thing I talk about. They're constantly pushing these advertisements for their services in notifications, in pop-ups, all of it. Like, I'm trying to use my computer, and you're like, bing, would you like to use our crap? Did I enable it? No, maybe I don't want to use your crap. So this guy literally says, well, it's probably one of those auto notifications jumped up, and in his haste to get the thing out of the screen, he accidentally accepted the button. This is a fundamental problem. Okay, so it doesn't appear as though they turned it on by default, but it does appear that their constant pushing of the things and their dark patterns caused the incidents to accidentally enable a feature he did not intend to use, which is a problem. He says, please check for the files via a browser at OneDrive.com using the same Microsoft account. Hopefully the files will be there, and if they are, please ask your son to make a backup, then try and make some space on OneDrive by removing his now backed up files. My Lord, folks. Okay, they're basically saying, you want to use this. We're not trying to use OneDrive. We're not trying to get 25 gigabytes of data to fit into your free 5 gigabyte account. We're not trying to do this. The question here is, did you turn this crap on? And this guy's like, I don't know, man. You probably accidentally hit it on one of our 15,000 pop-ups to do that. These are the reasons I left Windows. Now, this isn't a moot point because we got an article from NeoWin back in June, and we covered this on the channel previously. Windows 11 is now automatically enabling OneDrive folder backup without asking permissions. And so last year, no, they didn't turn it on in April 2023, but it does appear that in June 2024, they probably did. So they quietly, without any announcement, the company changed Windows 11 initial setup so it could turn on the automatic update folder without asking for it. Now, though, setting up a new Windows computer, the same way Microsoft wants them to, in other words, connected to the internet, signed into a Microsoft account, will get their desktop with OneDrive already syncing stuff from folders like desktop pictures, documents, music, and video. Depending on how much is stored there, you might end up with a desktop and other folders filled to the brim with shortcuts to various stuff right before finishing a clean installation. So then they're talking a little bit about it. This is the fundamental concern that I have. Windows oftentimes wants to sync data without your consent. They give you dark patterns and constant irritations with the opportunity to do something you do not want to do. So how do we have confidence that a company working so hard to gain access to all of your data on their platform, which is not zero-knowledge encryption? This means Microsoft employees can, in some circumstances, gain access to the files you have on your OneDrive account. Unless you encrypt it first, they can have access to things synced with OneDrive. How do we know that they are not syncing, maybe not all of the photos, But this SQLite database they use is very small. Now, we understand it has to be locally encrypted. Oh, that's right. Microsoft stores your encryption keys on their server. So if they take a copy of this file, which is very easy to do because of how small it is, and they already have your decryption keys anyway, guess what, guys? They can have access and be able to search through everything you're doing. Now, I don't have any evidence they're doing that, and likely they're not doing that. But it gives them an opportunity that if some law enforcement agency shows up with some gag order warrant to say, give us everything on this guy, and they hand over an encryption key, a bunch of files on a OneDrive account that you didn't sign up for, and an SQL database with a 3-month record of everything you've done on your computer, that kind of causes me a little bit of pause. Okay. Additionally, since it is installed on the computer automatically, it's not activated, but it is installed. Well, OneDrive is activated now. It wasn't activated now, but now it is activated by default. How do we know they're not just going to turn this toggle switch on if they want it? Maybe the law enforcement says, hey, we're doing an open investigation of this guy. We want to track his data for a while. Maybe Microsoft sends a little thing going, well, turn that thing on for a little bit. It'll silently be on the background. You don't even know it's on. They're collecting data and harvesting the data. It's a possibility. I'm not saying they're doing it. I'm saying it's a possibility. It is a way for them to 1984 you. Remember in 1984, the telescreens were always on. There weren't always people monitoring them. Now, when he wrote that, he didn't even have a concept that we could collect and store such data. But the idea is the telescreen always had to be on, and at any given time, somebody might be watching your telescreen, but you don't know. And so it causes you to behave a certain way in front of the telescreen. Well, Microsoft now has a way to turn such a thing on and store records of the data. Are they doing it? They say they're not. Can they physically do it? You better believe it. So the third major problem I have with this is that this should only be installed when the person needs it. It should not be installed by default. Any application installed in your computer that doesn't need to be there is an attack vector, which weakens the security of your system. So this application should not be installed unless you explicitly want to use it. If you say, this is a feature I want to use, you should go to the Windows Store, type in recall, install their application, and set it up. It should be a feature for somebody who wants it. I have no problem with that. But it should not be a feature that is installed on somebody's computer sitting for a toggle switch to be turned on, because somebody can accidentally turn on a toggle switch to enable OneDrive. Somebody can accidentally turn on a toggle switch for recall. And going further, how do we know they're not just going to toggle it on at some point in time in either accidental or silently intentional ways for whatever purpose they are deeming necessary to them? So those are three basic concerns that I have. Now, what if you like this type of software and you're like, I don't know if I can really trust it? There is actually an open source version of this. And so this is available on GitHub. It is called Open Recall, and you can take control of your digital memory. Everything here is done locally with fully open source code in a cross-compatible way. I have not played with or tested this out, but it features time travel, local first AI, semantic search, and full control over storage. So here's the Open Recall chart, Windows Recall. Now we'll talk about Rewind AI. Let's do that really briefly. If you are on an Apple, in the Apple ecosystem, there is an application called Rewind.ai, which enables you to have the same type of feature on Mac. Now, the difference is, number one, it is not installed by default on your Mac. You have to manually install it. Additionally, theirs, because it's Apple, has an annual or a monthly subscription fee. So if you go over to the pricing tab, we can see what this actually costs. So it looks like there is a free option. So I guess you can download it. The Pro is $19 per user per month. And you can see that the basic core apps are involved in the free. Search anything you've seen, said, or heard. Personalized AI that can answer. These are limited. Human level transcript summaries and automatic draft summaries, those are limited, and priority versus basic human support if you have need support. Okay, so there is a free option. I thought it was entirely subscription based. My apologies for that. But you have to manually download it, manually install it, manually configure it. So that's Rewind AI. So transparency, Open Recall is full open source. You can browse through all the files. In fact, you build it from here. Windows Recall, Rewind AI are closed. Hardware supported. This supports all. Windows Recall is Copilot Plus, and Apple does require the M1 or M2 Apple Silicon. OS support, Windows, Mac OS, Windows only, Mac only, and privacy. Everything on this is on-device self-hosted. Notes that they say Microsoft privacy policy applies, despite Microsoft says everything is local. Yeah, Microsoft privacy policy still applies, which basically means they can harvest stuff from your data. And Rewind AI is connected to ChatGPT, whether that fills you with thoughts of joy or thoughts of rage. Cost, it is free on Open Recall. Windows Recall is also free and maybe even forced upon you. Rewind AI, they do say a monthly subscription, but as we just saw, there is a free tier for people who don't need the full functionality to it. So you can actually go ahead and install it over here. I don't know, maybe I should do a video playing around with this for a little bit, see what happens. I don't know. I don't know if I have disk space for that. I don't know. We'll think about it. We'll think about it. But anyway, there are our thoughts about this return of Windows Recall. Yes, they have done a couple things. The biggest things, the best thing in my opinion is they enabled the in-use encryption. That was the biggest security hole that they had. They patched that. It is now opt in to use it rather than opt out to use it. That's an improvement, although I still contend it should not be installed on the system by default. So there are our thoughts about Windows Recall, what they are doing. And again, though, we talk here about some of the reasons to switch to Linux. If we didn't give you a couple of reasons there to at least give it some consideration, you might want to think about those. You can have a look at the other videos on my channel, see Linux distributions, how to switch to Linux, and some other philosophies around free and open source software and things like that. With that, though, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. Leave us a like and a comment down below, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.